Right, so let's get into this chat now. So the Miss S.A pageant is caught up in a controversy about the eligibility of a top 13 finalist, Chidimma Adetshina. She was born to a Nigerian father and a South African mother with Mozambican roots. Now, some South Africans have now launched an online petition to oppose her participation. But let's get some view on this. We're joined by Kevin Smith, who's a partner at Ahmed Ghani Attorneys. Kevin, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a conversation for just over a week now. And I'm keen to hear your thoughts on, when you see the conversation really starting to make waves on social media. This young woman, Chidimma Vanessa Onwe, Adetshina, a contestant in this year's Miss South Africa pageant. Your first thoughts?
Look, I think the rhetoric around her citizenship status, I think more than anything, it's just an anti-black and xenophobic sentiment. If you look at the arguments that have been made, people are arguing on behalf of the fact that one of her parents or both of them are not South African or don't have South African origin. But if you look at the requirements to enter Miss SA, you have to be a citizen with an SA ID book. And the fact that she's made it this far actually proves that she's, in fact, got the minimum criteria. So the argument should have been a non-starter to begin with.
Yeah, one of the discussions that... one of the points that had been made is many South Africans that perhaps are first or second or even third generation from another country but are citizens of South Africa do live in this country. And there's the argument that had her name, for instance, been, Michelle Adetshina, that it would have been different. The fact that her name is Chidimma Vanessa Onwe Adetshina as well has sparked the attention. What do you say to that? Is that a surface level discussion?
Look, if we take the discussion at face value, then it might seem that that's the only issue that's at play. But if we are going to take the matter for what people are purporting it to be, then how far along a line down the line of someone's lineage do we have to look for them to be considered South African? Do they have to have South African parents? Does it have to go further to their grandparents, great-grandparents? Or does the discussion then become only indigenous inhabitants of South Africa, where it becomes a matter where those who are declared First Nation status by the UN, will they be the only ones who are declared South African enough to compete on a stage like this? And I mean, that's something that everyone can admit would become ridiculous. And I don't just say that based on what's happening now, but I say that in my capacity as a chief of an indigenous tribe myself. This isn't something where we can define South African as just by your parents or your grandparents. Being South African has a lot more to do with various other factors. Like our constitution also points out, the country it belongs to everyone who inhabits it. So the discussion, I think people need to have an honest reflection in terms of where our society is right now and where our tolerance for the rest of our continent lies, because South Africa is not an island. We are still part of Africa. And outside of that, she is a South African herself. So she shouldn't be facing the backlash that she's currently facing.
Yeah, you raise such an interesting point when you talk about what is it exactly that makes up a South African. And I think perhaps that is something that we should get into the technicalities of, right? Chidimma Adetshina, her dad is Nigerian. Her mother was born and raised in South Africa but has roots from Mozambique. So at what point do we say that she is South African? So I'm trying to get the technicalities of that from a legal point of view, that is, right? And I don't want to talk about identity because that's a much broader spectrum there and we talk for hours. But if we talk about legally, right? So her mother, for instance, is a South African. That should be sufficient, right?
Correct. If you look at the law itself, for you to be declared a citizen prior to the 6th of October 1995, if you were just born in South Africa, you are considered a citizen. After the 6th of October 1995, if you are born in South Africa and you have one South African parent, then you are considered a citizen. So she meets that criteria. So legally speaking, yes, she is South African because she was born in South Africa, she has a South African parent, and the law declares her to be a citizen itself. So outside of what the public discourse currently is, the law has made itself clear on these types of issues. So if the public isn't satisfied with how the law deems citizenship, then that's a separate discussion that the public needs to engage our legislature on. But
Yeah.
as it stands, there is nothing legally that says that she's not just as South African as the rest of us.
I wanna look at some tweets that certainly have been shared on social media. They're called X's now, aren't they? People and what they're saying on social media around this discussion. Mabriga, for instance, says you automatically qualify for South African citizenship if you are born in South Africa and at least one of your parents is a South African citizen or an SA permanent residency permit holder. If you are adopted by a South African citizen, that is SA law. So this particular person really understanding that view that Kevin Smith is sharing with us as well this morning. Let's bring another one on. Mashishi says, unfortunately, she's not a South African. Her father is Nigerian and her mother's Mozambican. She had both these flags on her bio on social media accounts. She engages more in Nigerian audiences. That she is not pro-South African regardless of her descendants. She cannot represent us. Perhaps that's something to discuss with you, Kevin, as well. But let's see. Thabo Puti Mojela says, silly question that only arises when one is African. Kevin, someone saying that, well, if she does consider herself a South African, then even her social media platforms should reflect that.